Good morning and welcome to the Modern English Structure Introduction to English Speech Sounds. We are dealing with the consonants of English. We remember that the three-term label to describe a consonantal sound includes voiced or voicelessness, which is dependent on the position of the vocal cords. If they are very close to each other, voiced sound is produced, and if they are widely separated from each other, the voiceless sounds are produced. The second term is the place of articulation. Depending upon the place of articulation, we have various places and terms like bilabial if both the lips are involved, labiodental if the lip and the teeth are involved, dental if the teeth are involved, alveolar if the tip of the tongue and the teeth ridge are involved, post-alveolar and palato-alveolar depending upon the involvement of palate or post-alveolar region for the pronunciation of the sound, or palatal if only palate is involved, velar if the soft palate or the velum is involved, and glottal if the glottis remains free when the sound is pronounced. The manner of articulation is the third term to describe a consonant sound, and depending upon the way in which the air passes through the lungs, we could have it as plosive that we saw in the previous video. Today we shall be talking about the affricate. Let's move on to talk about the affricates in English language. An affricate consonant is produced by, number one, a complete closure of the nasal passage of air due to the rise of the soft palate. The air that is coming out from the lungs has to pass through the mouth only because the nasal cavity is closed. The complete closure of the oral passage is the second feature of an affricate. You find the same features in plosive as well. The difference between a plosive and an affricate is that the complete closure of the oral passage by a firm contact being made between the active and the passive articulators in the oral cavity, but the holding of the closure and the compression of the air that is coming from the lungs is released slowly when the active articulator gets separated from the passive articulator, causing a slight friction. This is the difference between an affricate and a plosive. Both in affricate as well as plosive, the nasal passage of air is closed, the oral passage of air is closed. In a plosive, behind the closure of the oral passage, the air coming out from the lungs is held up and compressed for some time and is released with a sudden explosive sound when the active articulator gets separated from the passive articulator. That's why it's called as a plosive. But in an affricate, this air that is held up in the oral cavity, which is compressed within the oral cavity, is released slowly with a slight friction. This makes the sound an affricate. In English, we have two affricates, ch and j. So a slow release of air is to be observed, ch, ch, that's right, and j. The tongue touches the teeth ridge. The tongue also touches the hard palate region, completely closing the oral passage of air. Slowly the tongue is to be removed, releasing the air with a slight friction. Let's go to discuss the production of ch sound. Ch as in church. Church. That's right. During the articulation of this sound, the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact that is made between the tip and the blade of the tongue and the alveolar ridge. Can you make it out? The tip and blade of the tongue with the alveolar ridge. Not only that, the front of the tongue is also raised in the direction of the hard palate, so that the air pressure is built up behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity for a fraction of a second. When the tip of the tongue and the blade of the tongue are removed from the alveolar ridge and the hard palate, you could find that the air that is held up in the oral cavity is slowly released with a slight friction. The vocal cords are drawn wide apart to let the air pass without friction. So, the three-term label for ch is voiceless because vocal cords do not vibrate, Palato-alveolar because the hard palate and the alveolar ridge is involved in the production of the sound, and affricate because a complete closure is observed and a slow release with a slight friction is seen. So voiceless, palato-alveolar, affricate is ch. Distribution-wise, ch occurs in the word initial, medial and final positions. As you could find in chain, 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 matches, 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 and batch, batch. That's right, batch. Let's practice for some more examples. CHEEP, cheap. CHIM, chin. CHESS, chess. CHAMP, champ. CHOP, chop. CHALK, chalk, the long one, chalk. CHOOZE or SE, choose, the longer back vowel. CHUM, chum, the central vowel. CHURCH, church, the central long vowel. PICTURE, picture. Voice aspirated, remember? Picture. CHAIN, chain. The diphthongs begin. A is the diphthong that is used in this word. CHOKE, choke. CHILD, child. CHOICE, choice. CHEER, cheer. CHAIR, chair. EACH, each. DITCH, ditch. SKETCH, sketch. PORCH, aspirate per, poach. MUCH, much. BIRCH, birch. Birch is a type of tree commonly found in cold countries. This is the letter H, EITCH, H. BROACH, brooch. COUCH, couch, aspirate co. CHECK, check. CHAMBER, chamber. CHANCE, chance. BACHELOR, bachelor. That's right. Read the words again and practice the pronunciation so that you could practice ch sound very efficiently. The next sound that we have is j. J as in JUDGE, judge. Now for the production of j, it is exactly the same as ch, excepting that j is voiced where the vocal cords vibrate. So the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact that is made between the tip and blade of the tongue and the alveolar ridge. The front of the tongue also is raised in the direction of the hard palate, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity for some time. When the tip of the tongue and the blade are removed from the alveolar ridge, the air held up is slowly released with a slight friction. The vocal cords vibrate when the sound is pronounced, and hence the three-term label for j as in judge is a voiced, palato-alveolar, affricate. And the distribution-wise, j occurs in all the three positions in English words, as you find in JUG, 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 initial position, STAGES, 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 medial position, and BADGA, badge, badge, final position. Some more examples for practicing j sound are JEAN, gene, JIG, jig, GEM, gem, JACK, jack, JAR, jar, JOB, job, JUNE, June, JUST, just, JOURNEY, journey, central vowel, JOKE, joke. I-N-J-U-R-E, injure. J-A-M-E-S, James, the diphthongs begin. G-I-B-E, jibe. J-O-Y, joy. J-E-E-R, Gia. B-R-I-D-G-E, bridge. L-A-R-G-E, large. G-E-O-R-G-E, George. A-G-E, age. B-E-I-G-E, beige. J-E-L-L-Y, jelly. J-O-K-E-R, joker. Joker. Compare it with the Indian pronunciation of joker. Joker. The diphthong is to be used. J-O-L-L-Y, jolly. J-O-S-E-P-H, Joseph. Joseph. Now, sir is pronounced as zer because you could see that in the word, all sounds are voiced. So, in the presence of all voiced sounds before and later, sir becomes z. J-O-E, Joe. J-E-S-U-S, Jesus. P-A-R-G-E, barge. S-I-E-G-E, siege. M-E-S-S-A-G-E, message. Message. M-A-S-S-A-G-E. You have the British variety as massage, massage, and the American variety as massage, massage. Practice the words again to see that the pronunciation is kept in mind. The diagrammatic representation for the sounds ch and j could be as following. As you see in the diagram, the tip and blade of the tongue exactly touch the teeth ridge. The front part of the tongue also goes very close to the palate region, closing the teeth ridge and the palate completely in the oral cavity. The air that is coming out from the lungs has to pass through the mouth because the soft palate is raised. And this air is held up for some time and compressed within the oral cavity because the active articulator is in contact with the passive articulator. When the active articulator gets separated from the passive articulator, the air that is compressed and held up goes out with a slight friction. That's why it is called as an affricate. Thank you very much for being a part of the discussion on affricates. In the next video, we shall talk about the other consonantal sounds. Bye for now.